Hello and welcome to another episode of Into the Afroverse with your host, William Jones. And Into the Afroverse is where we're taking Black folks into the future. Today we are rejoined by Dr. LaWana Richmond. As you may recall, Dr. Richmond is the San Diego coordinator for the Black Speculative Arts Movement and a fellow at UC San Diego Indigenous Futures Institute. Her research interests include leadership development and employee engagement, as well as access to and persistence in education. Her passion is Afrofuturism as a framework for critical thinking, destigmatizing intellectualism in the African diaspora, and nation building. And with that, I'd like to welcome back Dr. LaWana Richmond. How you doing?
I'm good. How
Excellent.
you doing?
I'm doing well. And once again, I'd like to thank you for coming back talking even further with myself and our audience today. When we're talking we were talking about some of the projects that you were actively engaged in some of your appearances. Could you further elaborate, please?
Well, one thing, and it's kind of funny that I forget to mention this. I've created a nonprofit organization. It's called Griot Nears,
Hmm.
and it's story. And the mission is basically engineering the future through storytelling.
Hmm.
Because when we're imagining and creating, whether it's art, music, literature, we're telling stories either visually, sonically, or there's a lot of ways to approach that. And with that, I use that to support the work I do with Afrofuturism Lounge, Afrofuture Con, Afrofuturism Dream Tanks, and then also to travel to these various events and forums where I'm presenting. The Probably the biggest thing that I need to make sure I mention are the dates for the events in the coming year. And I started with Greeneers because March 19th will be the 1 year anniversary of its launch. The actual date last year was the 20th because I center it on the vernal equinox as a time of spring when things begin to bud. Um, and I would hope that people will stay tuned to see what that looks like and support the work because a lot of the spaces that I find myself in are spaces that need someone who is completely vested in us and our interest in making sure that as plans are being made for the future, policies are being created, that, our interests are being factored in.
Let's see. So you mentioned the Afrofuturism Lounge. What is
Yes.
that exactly?
So the Afrofuturism Lounge, it started off, it was supposed to be an after party for San Diego Comic Con.
Hmm.
For people who aren't familiar, San Diego Comic Con is like the largest comic convention in the world. And it started here in San Diego in the mid 70s and has been going strong ever since. Um, Tens of thousands of people converge upon San Diego for that weekend. And for me, it was, there was a point, around the time Oscars are so white and the Grammys are so white was trending, it occurred to some friends of mine that, Comic Con was so white, and I will give them credit. Since then, there's been a lot of progress.
Right.
But at the inception of the Afrofuturism Lounge, Black cosplayers were getting a lot of flack for cosplaying characters that had traditionally been portrayed as white in comic books or by white people in movies and television. And so I wanted to create a space where, they didn't have to deal with all that, kind of like a little bit of sanctuary of blackness in the midst of Comic Con weekend. We started off, it was supposed to be a private party. We were expecting about 100 people. Instead, we got 750 people that first
Wow.
night. And originally it was just going to be a one-off, and it's happened every year since then. Even during the pandemic, we met virtually. And then so we met virtually the year that they did a virtual San Diego Comic Con. And then we met in person the year that there was just no San Diego Comic Con at all.
Oh wow. So like we talked about this last time, and this in your example, your story that you just gave kind of brings me back to this point. What is it about Black people existing in these spaces do you think is such a threat to so many other people? I mean,
Well,
someone might think, so what? You dressed up as Superman, you dressed up as, some comic book character, some movie character. What's the big deal? You like the character, you enjoy the film, the movie, the comic, whatever the case might be. Why do you think that is so threatening and off-putting to so many people?
Well, I mean, let's start with the fact for many people, when slavery was abolished-ish, and I'll say ish because if
Yes.
you read 13 and watch the film, you understand that. But we weren't supposed to be here that much longer. We were supposed to either die or leave, and we didn't. And somehow many of us continue to thrive. And if you look at most science fiction films, especially the earlier ones in like the 50s and the 60s, is all white people. There are no black people in the future. And I think that, it's triggering for people who are looking forward to a time when we're not around. And then the other part is for some people, these characters are sacred to them. It's kind of like, the way that people react when they go into a church and they see a black Jesus.
Right. Yeah. And that is still, despite the information, despite the evidence, despite everything, that's still problematic for a lot of folks. And I just saw within the last month or so, a trailer for a film. I believe it's called The Book of Clarence.
Oh, I can't wait. And then
Yeah,
is it Pete Stanfield? Oh,
yes,
I
that's the
love that
one.
guy.
So I can't wait to see, and I've already seen the responses online just from the trailer. You know, I can't wait to see what happens when this film comes out. And speaking of films, you said you're looking forward to that one. Are there any other films or movies that you're looking forward to as an Afrofuturist, or any that you
Oh,
watched recently that you'd recommend to our listeners?
okay, so the film that I'm looking forward to is the American Society of Magical Negroes.
Hmm.
um, because it deals with the magical Negro trope. And yeah, the fact that we feel like we have to like change our behavior in order for white people to be comfortable.
Yeah, and I saw when the trailer dropped, a lot of people had a problem. A lot of Black people had a problem from what they saw just in a couple of minutes and so forth. So once again, that'll be interesting to see what happens when that film finally drops.
Yeah,
Uh,
I mean, I encourage people who have a problem with that film and with that trope to look on YouTube at what is it, Key and Peele.
mhm.
They had an episode and it's they had a skit on the magical Negro, and it'll help make a little bit more sense. And then also understand that, satire works, and the reality is we got to deal with it. It's a real trope. I don't know if you're moving around on this planet, you come into contact with black people who go out of their way to make white people comfortable.
Right, right. No question, no doubt on that. Any other films or anything that you recently watched that you would recommend or you found offered some insight into Black people in the future?
Oh, insight into black people in the future. I won't say that I've seen anything recently that offered a whole lot of insight. I was well entertained by Rebel Moon, which is on Netflix, and then also They Clone Tyrone
Yes.
um, was again, it highlighted a lot of stereotypes and a lot of tropes. And, not to give anything away, but, the smartest person in the whole film was somebody that typically, a character that typically gets little to no respect and lots of disrespect in any space.
Yeah, I thought that was pretty ingenious the way that they were able to kind of flip that. So yeah, I don't want to spoil anything, folks haven't seen it, but
Yeah.
would definitely recommend going out to check that out. And if you're just joining us, this is Into the Afroverse with your host William Jones, and we're taking Black folks into the future. And today we are rejoined by Dr. LaWana Richmond. So, is there anything else in terms of the work that you're doing that you'd like to speak to and inform us of to let folks know what you're doing and where you're doing?
Well, I mean, part of it, I didn't talk a lot about the Black speculative arts movement, other than, it's a network of Afrofuturists all over the world. The work that's happening, there are, of course, exhibits and workshops and speakers. And, we have a lot of scholars and artists who can talk to you about what informs and inspires their work and how, you can move forward. And I will say that we're realizing that we're having impact simply because of the response of different governments. Recently, there was an Afrofuturism exhibit that was canceled in Europe due to um, some statement that one of the artists made on social media about the things happening in Israel, Palestine. And then in another, in Brazil, there was actually a fascist group that created a publication that was again critical of Afrofuturism and accused it of being racist. Because if we love ourselves, we must be racist, which is crazy. And then the government's response. In that case, it actually worked out where the government was supportive of the artist and the work. In the United States, our deputy chief science officer at one point was an Afrofuturist. In very recent years in the Biden cabinet, she was deputy, and then at one point she was in charge for a little while, and she had accepted a temporary appointment, and now she's gone back to her role in the academy. But the key is Afrofuturism is yes, it's fun and games and entertaining, but it's so much more. And if you're really paying attention, um, we are working tirelessly to create a path and to create blueprints for us to have a better future.
Excellent. And for people that are listening that are interested in it, they may have heard of it, seen some exhibits. What would you recommend if someone is saying, how do I become more active in this movement? How do I become more participatory? What can I do? Where can I go? What recommendations do you give them?
I mean, so a lot of it depends on like how you define active. So there are event organizers and promoters all over the United States and parts of the world that are creating and curating exhibits. I would start by looking to see who my local Afrofuturist is and how to support them, because I will tell you it's a lonely space sometimes, creating experiences for people and wondering if anybody gets it. It's like going on stage to do stand up and you got like all your jokes, but you don't really know how they're going to land until you're up there on the stage in front of people.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. So yes, I agree 100% with you on that. So as an Afrofuturist, looking at the current state of Black folks, what are you most encouraged about for Black people moving forward? And in what areas are you most concerned?
I think I'm most encouraged by the fact that we're getting content that's dealing with real issues. There are many people who never heard of a magical Negro before they saw the trailer for this film. But meanwhile, we were surrounded by them. There can be only one, and I'm the one. Um, the other part is I look at the young people, and for many of them, I will say as an Afrofuturist, I'm in my 50s. And so I look to the people in their 20s and 30s and even their teens to continue to shape and morph and like move all this stuff forward. And they're getting out there being active. I think one of the causes for concern is, we've got one of our what I think is a weakness in our community is we don't do a lot of succession planning. We get like these great leaders who create what we think are institutions that will endure, but because there is no succession planning, when that leader dies, that institution dies or at minimum is greatly diminished. And so I challenge all of us to look to our future, our young people, to identify who is going to come behind us to keep things going? Who are we going to hand the keys to the Porsche?
I am equally concerned, and I also have made that observation that there's this thing where, the leader dies or whatever. And like you said, the movement either dies or is greatly impacted. What do you think can be done since we're talking about planning for the future, how do we stop that from happening? Just, to put it quite frankly, how do we stop that from happening, in your opinion?
I mean, part of it is we've got to create space for young people to lead now. Leadership is not something that like is thrust upon you and you immediately get it right. It's something that you grow into. And we talk about being Afrofuturist or futurist, but if we are not being futuristic in our own environment in terms of looking to sustainability, which it goes hand in hand with succession planning, then we're failing. If I am doing all these events and work in Afrofuturism and I don't have at least one person under 30 who is in alignment with what my vision is, um, I'm just doing some like temporary stuff and I just stuck my hand in a bucket full of water. And when my hand goes, the water will go back to where it was when my hand wasn't in there.
Wow, it's a great way of putting it. It's a great way of putting it. So I want to speak about current technology. And it seems like every time we turn around, there's a new piece of technology. AI has now, garnered all the headlines and so forth. Moving forward, and I want to break this down once again into um, being optimistic, but also being cautious. When you look at the direction that technology is going, what is it that you're excited about, especially as it relates to its usage within the Black community, be it politically, economically, whatever the case might be? And also, if you have any concerns, what would those concerns be?
So I see tremendous opportunity. What I look for is the space when AI, AR, and VR are united. And I see it as a space that is still largely uncharted territory, which represents opportunity. When the internet was young, there were some people who were like, it's going to be like a passing fade. I don't even want an email address. And then there were people who like got in and started imagining possibilities and created business models, and it worked out great for Bezos. um, so I see it as a space that can help us be more united. I see virtual reality as a place of creation and for coming together and meeting. Yes, there are the entertainment applications, and one of the advantages that virtual reality has over Zoom is the spatial reality, the ability to like walk towards someone and have like a one-on-one conversation with them, similar to the way you would in a meeting. For people who are in environments where there are a lot of meetings, you understand that there's the meeting, but there are the meetings that happen during, before, and after the meeting between individuals or small groups of individuals who take advantage of proximity. Virtual reality gives you that opportunity to replicate that experience of proximity. Um, AI creates the opportunity for us to automate things that we thought were not automatable. AI is very evolved now, will continue to evolve. In terms of fears where all of these technologies are concerned, my greatest fear is that we will not jump in and learn and engage so that we're not left behind.
See, yeah, and that's something that, you know, uh, years ago, and I guess they still use the term digital divide. That was
Yeah.
a concern, like you said, with the outset of the internet, when laptops became, a bigger part of the household and so forth, Black folk were left out. Do you think that in many instances, Black folks were left out? And I think a lot of us are starting to catch on. But like you said, with new technology, because of basically our past in this country, where so many innovations and so many things have worked against us, a lot of us are cautious. And, especially when you start to factor in various conspiracy theories and so forth as to how these things can be used against us, a lot of Black folks are turned off in many ways by technology. How do you overcome that, or what do you recommend we start to do to kind of deal with that? as a community. Because like you said, if we don't deal with it, once again, we're going to be left out, left behind. And the way that this thing is moving, when I say this thing, I mean technology is moving at such a rapid pace. If we miss a week, that's like missing 10 years. You know what I'm saying? So what do we do to help our community for those that are concerned or those that are cautious overcome those fears?
So I'm going to say something that is not popular.
Mhm.
No matter what we do, everybody's not going to get it.
Right.
What I take responsibility for doing is supporting organizations that are doing the work to help people, and also doing my best to model and mirror behaviors that I believe to be in our best interest. And there's a point where you can't necessarily convince people by telling them. What you can do is do the things that you're supposed to do and show them, right? And so, you know how they're saying, I can show you better than I can tell you. And so, some of that is going to be us using it. And those of us who are aware, making sure that we create avenues and spaces to help shape policy. Because one of the things that is detrimental to us is we're often not engaged in conversations about policy, which shapes allocation of resources and access and even the flavor of information that's out there. And yes, the things that could be used against us, um, some of that it will be regulated, and some of that there is no way to really regulate or protect against it. And so it's better to know and see what's coming than to bury our heads in the sand. I would like to think that there will be fewer of us burying their heads in the sand. I am encouraged by the fact that we have at this point multiple generations that have um, been born into a world where the technology was already here. And so it was never a question of whether or not it was something they should engage in or learn about. It is something that they naturally and intuitively are drawn to and master.
I agree 100% with that. Excellent. So you mentioned policy in your response, and once again, we're coming up on a presidential election season. Well, it's season now. Folks are campaigning, and then there's always, of course, state and local elections. As an Afrofuturist, in your opinion, uh, what is it you think should be something we should be looking out for in terms of messaging or platform coming from candidates that are running for office? What do you think should be at the top in terms of what Black folks should be looking at for those of us that are not only concerned about the current state of the Black community, but the future of Black folks?
Wow. So, I mean, my view may be a little jaded. A few years ago, I ran for office, and so I got a chance to get a little behind the scenes look at our political processes and systems. And I will say, first and foremost, as much as people like to focus all of their interest and energy and attention on who's going to be the next president, local offices and legislators are far more important. They have far more power and impact. Um, not to say that, I'm not concerned with even what our options are in the first place, but really, on a local level, all those planning meetings and budget meetings and policy sessions of city council and county supervisors and, aldermen in some places or whatever the local agencies are, your water board and utility authority. Those are places where decisions are being made every day that affect your day to day, and plans are being made 30, 40, 50 years in the future, which if those plans don't have your input, they may not include you. This is how freeways end up going through Black neighborhoods and disrupting them.
Yeah, excellent. People talk about gentrification. That is not done on a national level. Those decisions are not made on a national level. Like you said, those are state and local politics. So yes, that is something that we need to be looking at. How does, and I guess you kind of talked about it, but if you could quickly just talk about real quick, Afrofuturism, how does it engage politics?
Well, I mean, I will say there are many Afrofuturists who are actively involved in the political process. And so that's one way. Another way is When there's an issue that we agree is significant and needs to be addressed, there will be groups of Afrofuturists who are writing policy documents. One of the things that we could use more of in that is support for Black think tanks so that you have people who can focus on scanning the environment and identifying possible responses and deciding on the best response as opposed to doing that in their free time while also supporting themselves and their families.
Thank you. And can you tell folks how they can reach you, how they can contact
Um, let's see, we've got drlawana.com, and that's drlawana.com. And then we have afrofuturismlounge.com. And on Instagram, Dr. LaWana Firiali and Afrofuturism Lounge are all active. Um, yeah, I think I still have, yeah, every now and then I have something on Twitter or Threads. And yeah, and then of course there are pages on Facebook, Brioneers, Firiali, and Dr. Firiali, Dr. LaWana Firiali Richmond.
Excellent. And as we close out, 'cause once again, it goes quickly, as we're entering into 2024, if you could give us marching orders, if you could give us recommendations, directions that we should be moving in or looking towards, what would be those marching orders or the direction you feel like we should be looking in?
Well, I encourage people to on Facebook. I mentioned all these groups. Afrofuturism 2.0 is a great place to look. So that's where we aggregate the events and activities of members of the Black speculative arts movement. I say support and pay attention to the United Nations Permanent Forum on People of African Descent. I also encourage people who are really interested in what's going on in the future to anticipate and pay attention to the United Nations Forum on the Future, which will be taking place in September of 2024. And then, of course, I'm biased, support my work so that I can continue to move about and do the things that I'm doing in favor of our better future. But on like a really small scale is, mindset. Um, Understand that you don't have control over other people. The only thing you really have control over, and only to the degree that you have mastered yourself, is yourself. Understand that, and then think about what you can do in order to prepare the future for the generations to come behind us. And as much as people like to talk about making their ancestors proud, kudos for that. But I say, think about the things that you can do that are going to make your descendants proud.
Wow. Well, I cannot think of a better note to end on than that one. Thank you, LaWana Richmond. I really appreciate the time that you've taken, 2 episodes of Into the Afroverse to share and impart your knowledge and wisdom. I hope folks are paying attention. Uh, Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your support. People are always asking what can they do to help keep this show on air because we are independent. Even though we are on WOL, we do operate independently. So you can go to afrofuturismnet.com and you can find out more information there on how to support this show and other projects the Afrofuturism Network is working on. You can also check out past episodes on the YouTube channel on the Afrofuturism Network page. One more time, Dr. LaWana Richmond, thank you so much for your time. Truly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Excellent. And special shout out to Mr. Duke Productions for producing today's episode. Take care, ladies and gentlemen, and have a good day.